Somebody did their big one, mystically, magically speaking. They employed every practitioner their hard earned money could buy or their hard stolen money could buy, whichever one. They called in every favor, they finessed every angle, they bribed every outlet they could, or resource they could, or for every resource that they could. I mean, literally, as the saying goes, everything but the kitchen sink. This is a everything and the kitchen sink type of energy in terms of the nefarious measures that someone was willing to take to secure someone else's downfall. Everything. I mean, everything. And here I am just casually cleaning my bathroom in between letting my bathtub soak with some bleach. And I'm telling you all this because it resonated as a message to me. I sat down just to shuffle the cards, like trying to get a read on what deck I should use. And at first I was like, am I using Game of Thrones deck today? But I just naturally reached for my black and white deck and pulled it out, even though my heart kind of wanted to do Game of Thrones for the past couple of days. I said, nah, I'll catch up with those later. So as I'm pre-shuffling and I'm just like going through, casually looking at the deck, and I'm seeing all of this energy. Ace of Wands, the Magician, the World card, the Ace of Pentacles, the Hierophant, the what else was it? Oh, it really doesn't matter to give you the rundown on the cards because we want to pull some fresh ones anyway. But just know that someone really went all out. I don't know if this was the Moon card, definitely came up, but so did the Sun. So it signifies exposure. And what came up for me just kind of letting the energy wash over me considerably. Like I said, as I'm cleaning my bathtub with bleach and letting it sit, is that someone, whomever the target was, took protective measures of which they didn't even realize. You know, some may have been intentional, but seemed, simple or trivial even to some degree. And then some measures that were taken, or I should say, measures that were taken that seemed to be like, just matter of fact, or things you would do every day, like taking a bath or like cleaning your house or cleansing your spaces, were exactly the things that help to create a protective field against these energies. And then there were some things that I feel were done inadvertently or even unintentionally, that, and I don't even know what those are exactly, this is just how it came to me, that seem to have a protective effect as well. Like when you do something maybe that's just unconscious, it's like one thing when you wash your ass every day, that serves multiple purposes. When you're cleaning your bathroom, that's just not the spirit and the flesh you're cleansing, or your house or your car or whatever. Those are just natural orders of the day, but there's some other things, and maybe it'll come up in the message, that were also protective, that the opposition may not have anticipated or had necessarily seen as a threat. Because, spoiler alert, not only did the energy that was projected not really land in the way that it was intended to, now it's all backfiring in such epic proportions that somebody can't even catch up with their rapid decline, with the rapid decline of loss and and repercussions and impact. It's like something's coming, things are happening one after another. There, it's not even a matter, because I've seen before in the cards where it's like a person will recover from one thing and then here's another. It's worse. It's worse than that. It's to the point where somebody's already down bad, but then here's another hit, and then that takes them even lower, and then here's another hit, and then there's another hit, financially, physically, energetically, emotionally, spiritually, their friend circles, their family life, conflict everywhere is what I was seeing, in the most intimate spaces in their lives, in the most general ways in their lives. It's like the energy that someone, it's like it's coming back in equal measure, but it's because it's one person. Here it is. It's not so much equal measure. It's really an amplified measure because of the collusion that someone incited with other forces. So not just is someone responsible for what they projected out, whether it be, their own intentions, their own negative projections, word curses, maybe their own magic, because I had a hit on a kitchen witch. So somebody was not only outsourcing their work to folks that they felt were more qualified and more effective in their craft, they were also so-called amplifying the process by doing their own little rituals and their own little magic or their own little mystical things, or meditating on the efficacy of the whole process. Whatever it was, they put their own intentions in the pot, but they also, why did it come up? What was the kitchen thing? There was something that pinged to kitchen witchery. I forget what it was. Oh damn, it was something really significant that I wanted to share when it hit. Maybe it'll come up later, but yeah, like somebody was, they was throwing their own stuff in the pot. But the reason why it's such an epic backfire is because of that. The origins of their intentions in the first place being extremely negative and calloused and downright diabolical, but then they're also receiving the backlash and backfire, not just from those that they've implicated that may now also be receiving their own backfires and repercussions, but also karma for that as well, if that makes sense. So there are people that are angry, or they may not even necessarily, it could, like I said, it was conflict everywhere in somebody's life in the cards. So it may not even be a direct connection to what they may be implicated in, or they may not even have anything to do with these mystical or magical implications. But it's like there's some thorn of unrest that is that is just relentless in somebody's life, so that even when they're in places where there should be harmony and balance and peace and cooperation, i.e. in family or in some type of intimate connections, there isn't. Or even amongst strangers that don't have any, that shouldn't even be affected by your energy, and vice versa. It's like somebody's even finding themselves in conflict. They go out and they get into an altercation, or they encounter road rage or whatever, like stuff like that. That seems like small, but that's the level of rage that someone has ultimately magnetized to themselves on account of their actions. And then, as I said, there's that coming at someone in ways that is justified and in ways that seems to be just completely random, in ways that are intentional and in ways that are just circumstantial. But then there's also the spiritual overlay of that, where, like I said, because someone, not just what's the word when you because someone incriminated others into their schemes and plots, it's like where you would think that, well, I didn't do that work, or I didn't call on that energy or that spirit, or send that, or do that spell, or send that projection, or do that ritual. I got somebody else to do it, so my hands are clean. Not so. All of that energy that was commissioned is also has a penalty of consequence for the person that incited it. And not to say that those that didn't find themselves with their hands dirty as well are completely free and clear and absolved. Not so. But in some cases, some didn't even really know what they were contributing to, and in some cases, some very much so did. And there was, a conscious exchange of energy and intention. But either way, for regardless, whatever the karmic debt may be for those that have been implicated intentionally, knowingly or unknowingly, is completely separate from what still is now mounted on top of someone's own personal karma. It's just ultimately all of this for nothing, really. It was wasted energy, because the intended target, as I said, has so many protective checkpoints, security measures in place, whether, again, they did so proactively, reactively, or it was done for them in ways that they just kind of assisted unknowingly, or unintentionally. Even with everything in the kitchen sink being thrown, there still wasn't a great enough impact for there to be a return and reward for their efforts, other than the sheer consequence of the intention in the first place, and of course the acts that follow. So, it begs the question, like, was it worth it? And from the looks of the card so far, it's a strong no. Okay, so let's I'm gonna shuffle real quick. And yeah, it's like a lot of people, I always say somebody to be clear, because I speak in the way that the cards are telling the story to me. But of course, it's not one somebody, but I fear that many folks may have got activated for this month of May because of the intense transits that we've had by way of the full moon in the beginning, the super moon in the end. We're still in the energy, more or less, of, or at least the aftermath of the Taurus new moon, which is pretty powerful, especially in real life affairs. So it's something about this month that people felt like, this was, like I said, their big one, their grand finale, their the curtain call, so to speak. Like, they were going to go hard or go home, in this last-ditch effort to really do some damage and reap some reward for it, on the back end. And it's like, it couldn't be more unsuccessful in the ways that they intended it to be. So let's see what we got here. anyway, hi. Hope you're doing well. It is May 19th, 11:47, which is 11:11. I hope all is well with you. The week is off to a good start. Let's just get a couple cards. We're already at 15. Sorry, because it was such a casual pre-shuffle that I really had no intentions of it being the preview message. I was just shuffling the cards. So, pardon me for the length. It wasn't anything that I, really worked out before time. It was just coming through so fluidly that I was like, damn, I'm not even in full reading mode. Like I said, I'm cleaning the bathroom. So, it is what it is. But let's see. I think really the question that I had in the back of my mind was, what's it all for, or why, really? I don't know if we're going to get an answer for that, but that was the thought, when I'm looking at all this, like, what is the urgency? What is the, what is the end result here, or what was the desired outcome, more or less? And I think, there's some obvious answers to that question theoretically when you think about the spirit of mysticism and magic as it is now in this era, maybe as it's always been. But I was just really thinking more specifically, like, what amplified someone to get so desperately active. I did see the devil card, so there could be a bit of obsession and possession at play. But to me, it's like somebody really bet it all. And it was almost as if their back is so up against the wall that they had no choice but to literally go all out. Perhaps even knowing full well that it was a strong possibility that things may not go in their favor. They still had to, or that the chances at least were really slim. They still had to, like I said, throw everything but the kitchen sink at, in terms of their efforts. Or else there is like a no turning back type of energy where it's like, it really doesn't match up for me, to come out on top. But if I stop or turn back now, there's no chance at all. So then what do you do? I don't know. Let's see. Oh. Bruh. Bruh. Really? First card out? This is what we doing? Okay. Well, there's that. Obsession and possession. Somebody's bound, or they just may no longer have any self-control or any control over their impulses in the way that would temper their actions and reactions. Maybe that's what it comes down to. Or they're bound by some I guess, it makes sense when thinking about the preview. It's like when you bind yourself by way of indulging or surrendering to such diabolical impulses, that is like a contract. And when and this could be in spirit and in truth, like in flesh, where now you've called in all of these favors, you've called in, all these resources and alliances, and you could, maybe someone made a lot of promises on what would be the return. They indebted themselves by way of their obsession to so many different people, to so many different causes, maybe to so many different entities, or entities that are commanding and demanding enough that there is no um, there is no there's no negotiation on the terms or on the satisfaction of the debt. It is what it is, and even worse than that, there's the terms that are spelled out clearly, and then there are the hidden ones that someone would hope, the clauses of, well, if you don't fulfill what you are promising to me, or what you're proposing you can offer in return for my service or for my help or whatever, this is the repercussions, or this is what happens. Like, those are the things that someone didn't even want to think about. Like, I'm gonna just put that to the back of my mind and not even entertain, because they wanted to focus their whole being on manifesting the best outcome. Like, this has to work, it's gotta work, it's gonna work. No, I swear, like, this is it. Like, I got so much going for this, so much on the line. I'm doing my own. Like, they may not even disclose what they were doing. Oh shoot, I'm getting a hit. Like, it could have been that what someone thought they were doing to amplify the work was actually undoing it. That's hilarious. Like, almost if somebody would have left well enough alone, the work may have done its own damage, or the work would have done what it was supposed to do. But someone became so obsessed and possessed by forcing the win, that they jumped in. You know what it's giving me? It's giving me the story in the Bible, and I know I will mess this up even though I've heard it a million times, but just theoretically, walk with me here. The story about Saul, and really what his downfall was, where he stepped out of his anointing and out of line. Saul being the king that preceded David, that was the first king of Israel, anointed by God. He had his own anointing, but he never really had the supreme esteem to carry the crown. To be honest, when he was chosen by the people, he hid because he was so insecure. Like, he didn't even think he was worthy. But fast forward, after many years of actually being in a position, and even having the blessing of God to occupy it, he overstepped his bounds, offering a sacrifice in place of Samuel, who was like the high priest, or he was the priest at the time that was supposed to be entrusted with managing sacrifices, because he was anointed for that role. But Saul got impatient. Here it is. Hear the story, and hear where I'm saying it correlates. Saul got impatient because they were in the middle of a war, if I remember correctly, and I think they might have been losing, I'm not sure, but there was some answer that he felt he needed from God immediately, and Samuel was like at a great distance away. So he felt like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to do the sacrifice, or I'm going to petition God or whatever in his place, because I can't wait on Samuel. I need it now. And at that point, kind of exemplified an arrogance to, again, overstep in a jurisdiction that he had no clearance for. And that was ultimately the beginning of the end of his reign. Not definitely at that point, but it was the beginning of his decline, because at that point he pretty much was chastised, and like the favor of God was kind of stripped from him, more or less, because he had done something that at that time, in that tense, was an abomination, you know. So and Samuel communicated that to him immediately. Of course, it didn't take shape or form, I don't believe so, immediately, but like I said, it was the beginning of the end for his reign. And so that's what I'm just reminded of here, where somebody really should have left the kitchen witching alone. You know, and not to say it would have, there wouldn't have been repercussions per se, even as I said, for commissioning work to be done, but you know, sometimes you gotta leave the magic to the magicians and stay out of it. You know, even as tempting as it may be, or as alluring as it may be, some things just ain't for everybody. And there's some, even when you are a particularly magical person, that, like I said, even Saul had the anointing of God to be in his position. He had great authority and power and influence in his position, but he didn't have that anointing to veer into, you know, the more holy and ritualistic practices that were reserved for a particular brand of righteousness. Hear me. So, you know, whatever that may be in the shadow and in the light, some are just anointed for certain practices, whether it be by bloodline, by culture, by inheritance, by the divine. Like, everybody has their own brand of anointing. And I'm talking about someone that overstepped and they fucked around, and now they about to find out, if they not already finding out, what level of clearance they actually did have and what they didn't. And like I said, back to the original point that spun into this whole story, if somebody would have kept their hands out of the jar, maybe perhaps an actual jar, maybe somebody was doing some type of jar magic or some, you know, kitchen witch shit, they freezer spells, like shit like that. If they would have stayed out of it, truly kept their hands clean, worked their brand of magic, which clearly in this case is persuasion and influence. If someone was able to will and deal so many resources and allies in their favor, it gives like somebody was able to bargain and barter for support and cooperation just by word of mouth, you know, just by convincing, or because they didn't really have, you know, what they had to give or to pay. They did, but it to me, like, it read like somebody just did a lot of convincing, a lot of charming, a lot of willing and dealing. Like I said, that's a brand of magic, you know. And maybe if the buck had stopped there, it might have been far more effective. Maybe not 100%, but far more effective than it was when they jumped in the mix, overstepping their bounds, and just really undoing ultimately everything that they were commissioning to be done. There's too many. Is it? I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, look at this. Somebody did too much. It's like one more thing over the 10. Like, you had already employed the masses to work on your behalf. Like, look, somebody literally sitting around, sitting back, chilling, ultimately. You had all the ducks in a row, everything in place, pretty much offloaded all of the heavy lifting onto someone else's back to carry. And that should have been enough, except they had to get their hands in the mix too. They just couldn't help themselves. They saw an opportunity, like somebody being idle almost, like, well, I ain't gonna just sit here and wait. Like, maybe I can help it out. Maybe I can help it along, or I could seal the deal. Like, they were so impatient with the process, or so anxious about the outcome, that one more thing is like literally the what they call it, the straw that broke the camel's back here. That was like, oh nope, you're done. You're done. Here comes Archangel Michael, like, see, now you done fucked up. You know you done fucked up, right? Now you know you done fucked up. Who told you to do all that? And it's activity. It's, of them, and with the Ten of Wands and the Ace, it's like so much emphasis on the effort that they put in. Like, you put your back into it. You gave, like I said, everything, and the kitchen sink somebody put into it, on the front end and the back end. And here's the Strength card. They had a strong will to follow this diabolical plan, but they also had no idea the power that they were up against. Like, somebody was already, the intended target was already Queen of Wands. Double down on the power and strength here. Was already sitting already and looking the other way. That's why I said it's like the emphasis on the intentional methods of protection, and also the unassuming ones, so to speak, where it's like just how someone naturally goes about their day or lives their life, or is activated in the spirit of supreme esteem, is a protective shield. So if you're trying to throw word curses, they kind of bounce off that outer force field. You want to project fear. It doesn't have a place to really land. You want to project insecurity. Where? With the Strength and the Queen of Wands, like, what is she going to be insecure about? And it doesn't have to be a fire sign at all, even though heavy on the fire, and particularly Leo here. But even to that point, that's main character energy. Everything else is just, everything and everyone else is just contribution to her story. Like the supporting role, or the extras, even, so to speak, to her own personal life story. Not to say that everyone isn't the main character in their own, like, not to say she's the main character in everyone's story, but in her story, if you're going to make someone like the Strength and the Queen of Wands the center of your attention, and the intention of your target, you better have read the script. You know what I'm saying? Because generally speaking, the main character is not going to be the one to take the fall. You're going to see that arc of the main character, the challenge, the overcoming, the triumph, and all of that before and in between. But the energy that someone allowed themselves to be possessed by, okay, so somebody else wanted to be the main character, but they didn't want to be the main character of their story. They wanted to, it's given Black Swan energy. they wanted to steal the leading role from someone else and just, you know, it's like the understudy hoping and praying that for someone to literally break a leg so they can slide into that role and maybe somehow become the breakout sensation that wasn't on anybody's radar. But it's like, yo, you got your own production, you got your own performance, you got your own front stage and center to um to attend to. Just like Saul, just like Samuel, they each had their own designated roles as the supporting character in each other's lives, because Samuel had his issues with insecurity too, because up until the people chose to have this king, he was leading them and effectively leading them, but they decided they wanted to be like everybody else and have the king, um, to have a monarchy when they were really being governed by the divine, ultimately, righteously. So his feelings were a little bit hurt. He was a little bit salty because when it came time to choose, they didn't choose him. But did he get bent out of shape? Did he lose his anointing over it? No. He maintained his integrity, played the role that he was designated, that he was assigned. And in the case of Saul's story, he was like a supporting character, to some extent, because Saul was the king. But then Saul wanted to change characters and end up and be the lead holy man, stepping into Samuel's arc when that wasn't his story. He had his own plot and his own arc to fulfill. And ultimately, that was a part of it. It is what it is. But you get what I'm saying, is that sometimes folks prematurely, unjustifiably, definitely unrighteously see an ideal and examine themselves and what in the role that they've been given, the lines that they've been fed, the story that they are writing, and they don't want that. They don't like that. They rather have yours. It don't work like that. It don't work like that. It never really did. Even if the Queen of Wands did break a leg and she might have been out for a couple of weeks or whatever, that's still her role. And what it amounts to be is that the ones that tried to step into that place, they might have been an okay substitute and for the time being while the Queen of Wands was recovering, but the fan favorite, the star of this particular showcase, is still the Queen of Wands. So that means when you got the understudy playing at the Broadway play that you done spent hundreds of dollars to see, you're not necessarily thrilled about that, because maybe you spent the money to see the star, that you have heard about, or the celebrity star that they had cast, and you might still enjoy the show. You're damn sure going to watch because you paid for it, but ultimately there might be something left to be desired, which, as I said, it'll be a great substitute in the meantime, but ultimately the spot is still going to be secure for the Queen of Wands if in fact she can come back whole, healed, complete, and just as good as she was, if not better, before she left. Her spot's still going to be secure. It's contractually bound, as a matter of fact. I imagine when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, I know things could probably be more cutthroat than you would imagine, like somebody really just blow it out the water. But then in that case, maybe it was designed for them to, for it to just happen. Sometimes things do happen that way, where you wouldn't have gotten your shot to really perform if someone hadn't fallen or had to drop out or step aside. And that's another thing, you know, where things happen naturally and serendipitously. But I'm talking about someone that put a lot of work into it, like literally black swan energy, which I believe I did see it like one time, I believe, but I didn't really retain the energy of that destiny swap, more or less. But I know the basics of it, and I know that even if she didn't actually do something to hurt the girl and sit her down from the performance to take her place, she definitely preyed on it energetically, like really was possessed by wanting that spot and wanting that role. And then when she got it, she lost her damn mind, because guess what? It wasn't for her. She couldn't bear the weight of that crown. She couldn't carry the pressure of that role. So we got the Two of Wands. Yeah, like this is just reckless behavior that someone made a choice. So it's not like, that's what it's given. It's like someone very intentionally chose to be reckless. It's not the Knight of Wands in reverse where, you know, so it's given that there was definitely a calculation here, and, you know, a streamlined choice, and where someone knew the options, like I was saying earlier, where it's like someone could really survey the odds, you know, or consider the odds and survey the potential, knowing that the odds may have been stacked against them. They still said, I'm gonna take the chance anyway. That's the type of ambition that a Knight of Wands would have, because they see their own gratification as more of a priority than what the potential consequences may be for their actions. They chose. And there's no point of comparison here with the Strength of Wands and the Knight of Wands. There, I mean, not even, not to be sexist or anything, but not even in energy is there. I mean, not to say a knight can't be a woman, but you feel me? Either way, like there's a disparity in rank here, if nothing else, and leverage and skill, influence, power for sure. Power for sure with the wands. But somebody said, I'm gonna take my chances anyway. It's like not only was somebody born into this, they were also initiated or like anointed or chosen for the level of power that they possess. And they've also, it's, with the Strength card, it also, especially up against the devil, it gives like somebody that proved their value, you know, proved their capability to handle such a magnitude of power. At this level, you don't become possessed. Like, you've been tried by fire, more or less. You don't become possessed by your own ego, possessed by the fascination of what you can command, or even obsessed with your influence to demand certain outcomes or certain things. It's like having the same authority or capability to certainly the influence to be able to enact the same level, to commission the same level of work consciously, maybe even to be reactive or what's the right word? You know, to be provoked you know, and it could even be justified, you know, like to know, say, knowing that you have certain forces against you and you have the ability to just pick up your wand and start waving it around too, and start projecting all types of backfires and and out of vengeance, or you know, and maybe not even just vengeance, but just because you can, you know. But that's what temperance again is enacted here, where that is the measure of a true leader. You know, that's what really separates the mice from the men, when you can do a thing but you don't, you know. And just because you have the power and maybe even have the authority, in the case of Saul, where you have the power, you have the resources, you can pretty much command that things be done for you when you can't do them yourself. But should you, you know, that's the real test of character, which determines who's really worthy of that main character seat, or role, or that seat of power or influence, justifiably and responsibly, and who just wants it because it's shiny and it looks fun from the outside, or there are a lot of perks, or there are for the privileges, you know what I mean? Just to be able to say you are that person, or for the accolades, the applause, the recognition, the fame to be in the leading role, even though you can't carry it, you know, the way that the star truly does. Like, if you can't take all of it with that, and most times the person that is in the position that they're in, just as you audition for a lead role, has gone through the grunt work to prove themselves worthy of being chosen, you know, or prove themselves the premium choice in the regard that they are most passionate about purely. So when somebody else comes along and is trying to just slide in, you know, on the backs and the back door of that hard work, it's only a matter of time before the pressure makes them cave, because you didn't prepare the same way. You didn't endure the same level of pressure to handle that role before you occupied it. You just wanted the spoils of it. And that's the difference here between what someone was obsessed and possessed for and what they were really divined and designed to manage, to handle, to bear. King of Cups. And what else? Maybe they should have stayed in their lane. Of all the things here, so much fire. And the Cups is like really quite opposite with the Swords. And that was the truth they didn't want to face. That was a truth they didn't like about themselves. They didn't want to be the King of Cups. And this, I mean, it could be a water sign, but doesn't have to be. But there was something about, like, just not being grateful, maybe even quite honestly despising themselves. Certainly, in the most primitive sense, having a lower self-esteem in regards to who they are naturally, the gifts that they possessed organically, and seeing something else and saying, but I want to do that. I want to be able to have that. And here it is. Now, in this case, especially with the King of sandwiched between the Knight of Wands and the Three of Swords, this could actually be that energy of persuasion, maybe even of seduction, um, that I was speaking of, where someone is gifted in a way of almost, you know, seducing or charming people into doing what they want them to do, like manipulating emotions and the spirit, using that to their advantage to activate people on their behalf. That's one thing, and I'm not saying that used diabolically is okay, but if that's your thing, that's your thing. But somebody just couldn't, the buck couldn't stop there for someone. They wanted to transition or take over another field or another craft, or just to gain another skill set or whatever. Maybe in a bit of jealousy, I would say, with the King of Cups looking at the Three of Swords, there could have been some envy or jealousy here. Like, yeah, my phone just goes off at 12:23, which ultimately, wait, what was it just now? Yeah, 12:23. I don't know. When I first looked at it, I saw 333, which was weird. That's why I just got confused for a second. Like, what? Wasn't it just, as I was saying, it was almost as like something changed, but nothing changed. I don't know what that means, but either way, yeah, maybe someone was trying to manipulate timelines. That's what it is. Projectively, creating illusions. Again, they wanted to create a different identity in a timeline that was not, that their story was not written, that they wanted to create a different identity and a storyline on a timeline that was not in alignment. Like they wanted to be able to be something else in this breath of life, on this timeline that was not written into their script, into their fate. It wasn't in their arc, so to speak. So they took it upon themselves to trump the divine and take what is mine in their own quotes, because for whatever reason they believed somehow they either believed or were convinced that that was the way of the world. Maybe here with this devil energy, that when you want something, you just gotta claim it, you just gotta take it, you just have to, beyond the fake it till you make it energy, like you just have to proclaim it and it's as good as yours. You want to be the King of Wands instead of the King of Cups? Hell, you want to be the Queen of Wands instead of the King of Cups? You have that right. All you have to do is put in the work. And if the Queen of Wands is not strong enough to protect their position, then it's all justified. All is fair. That's what someone was convinced of. Clearly, misguided in that regard. But they also had the evidence, because this was a pattern of intention that someone employed over and over again, to see something, maybe even an identity, and mount it on themselves, almost easily, after they learned the craft of how to do it, but, or they figured out their own brand of manipulating that outcome, whether it be by their own hand or using other influences outside of them. When they figured out the way that gets to be done, this is literally somebody that would change clothes or change costumes on at will. They see it, they see something, they like that, they like the results that they see someone else getting, being a certain way or being having a certain personality or having a certain level of confidence, and they're like, oh, I want that, I could do that, maybe even do it better than them, because this is an actor here. I haven't been talking about that for nothing. So they feel like they could do it better than you, and why, if they can, then why shouldn't they? But the heartbreak here is, like I said, somebody was out of their wheelhouse and they couldn't do it better than the original, than the star, because that was not the role that was assigned to them. They can do it better than anyone in the role that they play, for sure, okay? But in the one that they tried to assume, steal, dare I say, they tried to steal the show, and it was an epic fail. Bad reviews all around, from the people that are observing or spectating, watching, the people that are that they have commissioned to participate along with them, to do work on their behalf. Like, everything is just 2 thumbs down for this person. And that I feel like that's the heartbreak that they're having to face, because something about them has been so convinced that they literally can jump into any identity they see fit and kill it, knock it out the park. But being faced, here's where the ego has flared and ultimately taken over, because in this particular role, it's like one of the first times, or the most maybe not the first, but maybe one of the most impactful times where someone is faced with a position that they just cannot fill to the point of to a convincing point. They just couldn't. They may have been able to substitute, or they may have been able to steal a couple lines, but when it comes down to it, like I said, I mean, case in point, this is a queen, this is a king. These are wands, this is cups. So there's no correlation here whatsoever, just at face value. So it's literally like a man wanting to play a woman's role, but you may be able to do that, but you'll still be just a man playing a woman. You'll never be able to you'll never be able to convince anyone that you're actually a natural woman. That has a whole nother layer that I ain't getting into, but clock it, okay? Because I don't have no, I live and let live. Everybody's free to do as they please, but there's a layer of that becomes delusional when energies such as that pit themselves as competition against what is natural and organic. It's okay. Be who you want to be. Play who you want to play. Transform however you feel in your heart to do so. But let that be what it is. There needs to be no comparison, and certainly no competition with what was just naturally designed to be. The two can mutually coexist without being combative, and that's the energy that I'm getting here, where someone just couldn't be happy being what they ultimately, created themselves to be. So they had to go on attack, as if triumph over something that was naturally ordained to a certain position or, identity was going to somehow reflect their dominance, or somehow be validating. That's what it is. Like, I'm the real one, or I'm the better one, whichever, But it's like, you ain't fooling nobody with that wig, sir, ma'am. just be you if that's what you want to do, but you ain't fooling nobody. Okay? So don't even try. And of course that's primitively, but this is I didn't even get that. That's what it has boiled down to, but it was something much more mystical and yeah, strange than that. Certainly far more spiritual and energetic than it is natural, so to speak. Ain't even no pentacles on the board. It's just hella wands, if you feel me. So I don't know. That just took a whole nother turn, which is so funny. But let's see what's on the bottom here. The Knight of Pentacles. The Knight of Pentacles and the Six of Wands. Yeah, it's giving like what it's feeling like is like somebody still trying to catch up how this looks to me. The Knight of Pentacles on its own is like, okay, that's no problem. That's one of the knights that you want to see coming. Somebody stable, reliable. But behind, which the Six of Wands is kind of an androgynous card for me to an extent, because I always read it as a woman, but in the guidebook, it actually is a man. So there's that aspect all over again. But it's like somebody that wants to be recognized in the authenticity of their projection or portrayal of a certain energy or with a certain influence even. And eyelash. And no matter what efforts, because we know the Knight of Pentacles will put in the work, no matter what efforts they employ, they're always multiple steps behind the game. And they always will be, because it's not designed for this person to be revered or recognized as this. It's just not. You gonna be the Knight of Pentacles or whatever, whatever the Knight of Pentacles destiny is supposed to be. You can do that effectively. You can do it convincingly, but you're not going to take the place of someone that has mastered their craft, that has solidified their identity in the most organic sense. You're just not ever going to swap places. It's like somebody is trying to, exchange something for this position, but this is not enough, and it never will be, because this is an offering towards something that is more aligned with this energy. What this energy is trying to offer in exchange for is a mismatch. It's certainly not now ever going to be a smooth transition for someone without consequence or without doubt, or skepticism. And now that somebody has done everything that they possibly can to try to clinch that win, for their own personal validation, and it's all backfiring, it's like somebody really is going to have to get back to the basics of just rolling up their sleeves and being who they're designed to be, or even, working on the energy that they truly desire to project, but on their own merit and in their own regard, not as a reflection or deflection of something or someone else, but who are you? when it all comes down to it. And like I said, we didn't have any pentacles, but now we do, and that's the one that exemplifies like hard work, dedication, devotion, commitment to something real. Ultimately, there really is no overnight success or sensation that lasts long enough to really rant and rave about. Those that are being exalted or recognized or praised and applauded for what they do, for the energy that they carry, what they exude, that command ultimately a certain level of praise and attention and accolades, maybe that command the room naturally, is exactly that point. They're just being who they are. No frills, no spills. That's what really gains attention and notoriety, especially in this era. And you could be the villain, or you could be, the hero. Whichever you choose to be, let it just be authentic, because that's the storyline that's going to be most fascinating, and that's going to yield the critic acclaim that some people are after, but they're just after it either for the wrong reasons or in the wrong character. One that was not assigned to them rightfully. So that's that on that. So all that ultimately to come down to, I believe, what somebody was really chasing was fame, recognition, and reward. That primitive, at the end of the day, they wanted that applause. Well, bravo. Bravo. You did a bang up job, literally. You did a number on yourself. Congratulations. Encore, as a matter of fact. Take your bow. Ridiculous. Oh, man. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As I go back to clean my bathroom, make sure you do all your cleansings and keep your space clear. And, your spot is secure as long as you are devoted to it. That's one thing that I can say. There's definitely no fear here for those that are just naturally taking up the space that they were divine designed to fulfill. There may always be those that want to take your spot, or that think they can do you better than you, or do what you do better than you. And let them has been no better phrase spoken over the past couple of years, because ultimately time will tell, who's the real and who's the understudy. Yeah. So it is what it is. You have nothing to worry about as long as you continue to star in the ways that you have been chosen to do so. All right. And for those that do, you don't even do it for the applause or to be seen or recognized. You do it because that's just who you are. And that's the real prize here. That's the real privilege, to be so highly esteemed in your own regard that it really doesn't matter, as I was saying earlier, like you're not even bothered by competition or collusion or chaos or anything of the sort. Contempt. It just rolls right off your back. It bounces off your force field, because that's not what you do it for. You do it for you. You do you for you. So, all right, I'll leave it there for real this time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Until next time, as always, I leave you with peace.